Hi, everybody. My name is Travis, and this is the Daily Travesty. And what I thought I would do today is go through the Magic the Gathering Arena tutorial and just kind of point out the spots where the tutorial leads you a bit astray in terms of strategy. Obviously, I understand that the point of the tutorial isn't to get super in depth with strategy and tips on how to optimize your gameplay. The point is to just get people playing Magic, teach them what the cards do, and that. But I noticed when I played through it that there were a couple glaring issues with how they teach you to play. There's a couple little tweaks I would make. So, for anyone who's just starting out in Magic, if basically all you've done is played the tutorial, that's great. This video is for you. And I'm just going to show you a couple little strategy tips that are going to help you play better right out of the gate. Things that you might not have thought about before that the tutorial kind of does a disservice to you by teaching you. And I would like to unteach you some of those issues. Obviously, this video is targeted for newer audiences. I would say if you haven't played through the tutorial yet, you should probably do that first, learn what the cards do and some of the basic strategy. But then come back, watch this, and I'll just give you a couple tips on how to level up your game right away. A bit about myself, I've been playing Magic for the better part of probably 20 years at this point, and I've just picked up a couple good habits along the way, a couple bad habits as well. But we are going to get started here, and I'll see if there's some things I can teach you right out of the gates here. So those of you that are new to Magic, basically the premise is that you are a planeswalker, a very powerful Magic user that travels between different planes in the multiverse, and you battle other planeswalkers and try to prevent them from hacking their nefarious plots, or perhaps you're the nefarious one. And not much really to start with here. We're basically going to play a land every turn. The tutorial talks about that, and in general, that is the correct thing to do. We do not have any spells we can currently cast. This Shrine Keeper costs 2 white mana. The 2 little sun icons on the top right tells us that. So in order to cast this Shrine Keeper, we're going to need 2 lands in play. Lucky for us, on our second turn, we can play our second land. And the tutorial is very helpful here, letting us know that we are able to cast our Shrine Keeper. So this is very standard so far. The first thing I would say is that this card is actually awful because it costs 2 planes. You can find cards that are just as powerful as this. 2 mana costed 2 power, 2 defense, but they don't cost 2 white mana. A lot of the times, we're going to see some cards later, you'll see that they'll have 1 white mana symbol or 1 black mana symbol or 1 green mana symbol, and then a 1 next to it, which means you can pay any type of mana for it. In general, I would never put this card in my deck. A lot of the time you are playing decks that have more than 1 color in them, and something like this is going to be a lot more difficult to cast because we have to draw exactly 2 planes with our spell to cast it. So it's going to be pretty tough. So this is the first point where the tutorial does a little bit of a disservice to us. They're asking us to play our Shrine Keeper before we go to combat. And in general, you want to hold your cards in hand as long as you can in a lot of circumstances. But in this situation, we're definitely going to play Shrine Keeper this turn. But I want to play it after combat. My opponent doesn't know what this card is, and I want to deny them having that information as long as possible. So what I would like to do is attack first with the Shrine Keeper, and let's say they have a spell that can maybe destroy my Shrine Keeper or somehow interact with the game. I want them to be doubtful about playing their card because they don't know what's in my hand. If I just play this creature now, I'll have no cards in hand. The opponent has perfect information. They'll know exactly what I am doing, all the resources I have, and that's going to help them make better decisions. And I want my opponent to make uninformed decisions. So I would like to go to combat, and I can't. The tutorial is making me play this creature before I attack. In general, that is a bad habit to get into. Now, there are lots of game situations where you would want to play your cards first, but in this situation, I would always attack before I played my creature, just to try and make sure the opponent doesn't have perfect information. Our 2/2 is going to attack. We're going to deal 2 damage to the opponent, and our creature is going to be tapped, which if you've played through the tutorial, you know that this means that this creature is basically out until my next turn. It can't block, it can't use any other abilities. My lands are also tapped, same thing, it just means I can't use them until my next turn. Opponent playing a 2/2 here as well. This card is the perfect example of what I was just talking about, where this would actually be a much better card, our Shrine Keeper. Even though it looks exactly the same, it is 2 power, 2 toughness, and it costs 2 mana to cast. But notice that they only had to have 1 forest to cast it, and 1 of something else. They still have to spend 2 mana, and in this case, this deck only has green cards in it, so it still costs 2 forests. But let's say we wanted to make a sweet deck. We built our own deck after playing through the tutorial, and we put both white cards and green cards in our deck. Well, we're going to have to play some forests and some plains, and this card is much better because I could cast this using 2 forests, I could cast this using 1 forest and 1 plains, whereas our Shrine Keeper has to have 2 plains. So if I put this card in my green/white deck, I would have to draw only plains at the beginning, and the likely case is that I also have some forests in my deck, and maybe I couldn't even play this card right away. So same situation here. I do want to attack here. We have 2 cards in play. They only have 1, and their 2/2 will be able to block this Locks It On line breaker I just drew. Costs 3 mana to play, 3 power, 2 defense. So if I play this card, it is going to be stronger than what I currently have. It has a little bit more attack. But if I attack this creature into the opponent's creature, they're both going to kill each other. I deal 3 damage to their 2 toughness. They deal 2 damage to my 2 toughness. They're both going to trade. The term is trading in Magic when both creatures kill each other. I would much rather trade my 2/2 for their 2/2 than my 3/2 for their 2/2. So this is the situation where I want to attack first because I want my opponent to kill one of my 2/2s, so then I can play my 3/2 next turn, and maybe I'll be able to hit them for more damage. So let's go to combat here. And it is nice that the tutorial actually lets you do this. I noticed this, that they tend to teach you something that you cannot change, but then in future turns, they let you make your own decisions. So in this case, we do want to attack before we play our 3/2. So the 2 creatures trade, our other one gets in for 2 damage, and now we're going to play our 3/2. The tips and advice I'm giving you right now are meant to apply to player versus player games. I don't think it's really possible to lose the tutorial. So although I'm giving you tips and strategies on how to play better, basically during the tutorial, your deck is stacked for you anyway, because they're just trying to teach you the game. So these tips and strategies are meant to be applied to when you start playing online against other people, or even against computer opponents that aren't scripted. Obviously, we're not going to attack here. This is a situation that a lot of new players would get into, where they might think, oh, I'll just attack regardless, because even if their larger creature, 4/4, kills one of mine, I'm still going to get in for 2 points of damage, and then my opponent is closer to dying, and that's good. But in general, that would be bad to do here. Magic is a game about resources, and it is not worth throwing away a resource, an entire creature here in this case, especially when our opponent has basically one card in hand, one creature out that's much bigger than ours, and we have nothing. If I had a whole bunch of cards in my hand where I could play another creature this turn and keep threatening them, maybe it would be okay to attack and just let one of my creatures die to deal damage to them. But in this situation, it's better not to attack. I would rather save my cards. This also prevents our opponent from attacking a little bit, because if they attack us with their 4/4, and it was just a 4/4, we could probably just take the damage and then kill them next turn. But their card has been buffed here, so we do have to block. If we don't block, we're going to die. So we just throw our cheapest creature in front of it. This is called chump blocking. There's no chance of our creature surviving, but we don't want to take the damage. So nice that they teach you chump blocking there. And hey, the deck has given us a card that is perfect for the situation. Now, this is a situation where I do want to play my card first before I attack. The opponent doesn't have any creatures in play that are untapped. This Baloth attacked, it's tapped, it cannot block this turn. So I am probably going to be attacking with my line breaker. But the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I destroy the Baloth first. This is a situation where I want to play this card first, because if they play a spell from their hand that prevents my card from taking effect, if they somehow manage to save their creature, I might want to choose not to attack in this situation. Obviously, our spell killed their creature, which is great, so we will attack. But we wanted more information in that situation. We wanted to see if the opponent was going to play something to save themselves. Okay, opponent with 2 creatures to our 1 creature, and either of their creatures is able to block ours. This is a situation where I likely wouldn't attack. Magic is about resources. If I attack and their 2/2 and my 3/2 trade with each other, they both kill each other, my opponent is going to have more resources in play than me. Now, this is a situation, I think, where the computer wants us to play this spell, tap all creatures our opponents control with toughness 2 or less. And that's perfect. In general, I wouldn't play this spell at this point in time. I would save it until it was more advantageous. But in this situation, the opponent only has 1 life left. We have a creature with 3 power. If we attack them and it gets through, we are going to kill them. So in this case, again, we're going to play our spell before combat. So sometimes it is appropriate to do that, especially if it changes what their creatures are doing. We call this the board state. So if it changes the board state, what does the board look like? So not much guidance there, just simply being more aware about when you should play your spells. Should you play them before combat or after combat? And it is oftentimes an important decision that gets a little bit overlooked. And we've unlocked ourselves a new card here. 5 mana, 3/4, gain 4 life. Just a quick note about gaining life in Magic. In general, gaining life purely to gain life is not worth it. There are some cards that say when you play this card, you gain some amount of life, and that's all they do. Those are generally not worth putting in your deck. A card like the Spirit there, that is also a creature that gains life, those can actually be really good because you're adding to the board, you're playing resources that you can use, and you gain a little bit of life. Those cards tend to be much better than simply pay 1 mana, gain 3 life, or something like that. All right, next opponent. Playing against this Goblin. Same as last time, we drew our Shrine Keepers. In general, you want more out of your creatures than just 2 mana 2/2s. Even worse than that is a 1 mana 1/1. unless your deck is built specifically around a strategy that involves 1/1s and being very, very quick, this card is much worse than Shrine Keeper. I mean, sure, our opponent is going to hit us for 1 or 2 damage, but as soon as we get to turn 2, our creature is just going to be way better than all of theirs. Yeah. So the opponent wasted 3 cards here. They're going to get in for a little bit of damage. And then we're going to play 1 card that is better than all of theirs. We call this blanking in Magic, where our card basically blanks theirs. An intelligent opponent wouldn't necessarily attack here, but I think this computer is just trying to show a very aggressive strategy. So we are always happy to eat one of their creatures, as opposed to trading. When both creatures die, if we just kill their creature and they don't kill ours, we call that eating. So we ate one of their creatures. Then they played a creature that's bigger than ours. 3 mana, 3/3. So they have blanked our creature from attacking, but we weren't really attacking anyway. We are definitely trying to defend here, trying to prevent our opponent from having a very quick start, and hopefully we can draw something that can help us win. So we aren't attacking. No reason not to play our 2 spells. And our Sanctuary Cat, which also isn't a very good card, now blanks their 1/1s. And we have 2 Shrine Keepers in play. I think the point of this tutorial section is to teach you about double blocking. In general, this is an awful play to make because we can eat one of their goblins, and we are going to trade a 2/2 for a 3/3. Which is really good for us. We're trading up. We're going to trade 1/2/2 for their 3/3, which means that we gained an advantage there. Double blocking can be very powerful for this reason. Now, the issue is that in a real game, I don't know if I would have double blocked there. The opponent had 4 mana untapped and 2 cards in hand. And one of the issues with double blocking is that you open yourself up to basically being what's called blown out by the opponent. If they had a spell that pumped their creature up, made it bigger, or killed one of mine, I would have lost both Shrine Keepers and not killed their creature. Just as a note here, it's pretty obvious that we want to attack here, but playing against a red deck, you always have to be careful or mindful of haste creatures, like these 1/1s that the opponent played earlier that can attack as soon as they play them. If I was sitting at 1 life here, or even 2 life here, I might choose not to attack with everything. I might only attack with the 2/2, for example, and keep my cat back to block, just in case they play a creature that has haste and can kill me right away. I think our life total is high enough that even if they have a haste creature, it's probably not going to kill us. So we're going to attack with both here. Opponent doing a good job playing their creature in their second main phase. And yeah, this card is quite good, I think. Gang Leader 2/2 makes 2 1/1s. That is a very good card to put in your deck. Generally, when you can make more creatures from 1 card, you gained a resource advantage, right? They spent 1 card and they got 3 creatures out of it. That's pretty good. Even though the creatures are a little bit dorky, just little tiny 1/1s, it's still worthwhile. And in a lot of situations, 4 mana, make a 2/2, make a 1/1, make a 1/1 is actually going to be better than 4 mana 4/4. It has the same total power and toughness, but it's spread between a bunch of different creatures. So that gives you more resources as a player. I'm not sure if it's going to pay off for them this game, but in general, that's pretty good. All right, same as before, we're not going to play our Spiritual Guardian yet. We do want to attack here. We can't attack with the Sanctuary Cat because would just die to the gang leader. And this cat blocks their 1/1 goblins really well. So I want to keep this on defense. I don't mind attacking with the Shrine Keeper here because they could block with their gang leader and trade, or they could double block with the 2 goblin tokens and trade 2 creatures for 1, which is also fine with me. If I didn't have the Spiritual Guardian in play or in my hand, I probably wouldn't attack here. Given that we're a little bit lower on life, we're not really sure how much power the opponent has in their hand or in their deck. But because we have a nice creature here that's going to blank everything in play, prevent it from attacking profitably, and it's going to gain us a bit of life, I'm totally fine attacking here. And the program actually does let us do that. They wanted us to summon the Spiritual Guardian first, but again, we want our opponent to make decisions without knowing what's in our hand. Now we play this, we gain a bit of life, and we are now ahead. We have more life than them, our creatures are better than theirs. They do have a card in hand that we don't know about, but right now we are definitely ahead in this game. Now this is an attack that is a little bit weird. Obviously, neither of their creatures is as good as ours. If your opponent ever does this to you, I would be very skeptical about blocking. I think what the program wants us to do is block with both, but I'm not going to do that here. I think that our Spiritual Guardian is very good in the current board state and is going to be more powerful than a lot of their cards. And I don't want my Spiritual Guardian to die if they play some weird spell from their hand. We have 12 life. We have a lot of life. It's actually fine to take 1 damage here. And now the opponent has to decide if it's worthwhile to kill this cat. If they want to play the spell that's in their hand to kill our cat and save their 1 goblin, that's totally fine with me because it gets a card out of their hand. So I am fine with this. I'm fine taking 1 damage to try and see if the opponent has a spell. Okay. They have quite a large creature here, 7/3. In general, I would say this card is probably not great. If you spend 5 mana on a card, you probably want a little bit more toughness than this, depending on how good the ability is. 7 power is certainly a lot, but again, if we go into combat with this creature, it just trades with our Spiritual Guardian regardless. And we have a second one coming up, so what we're going to do here is we're not going to summon a creature yet. We don't want our opponent to know about the second one. What we're going to do is we're going to attack with the 3/4. No reason to attack with the 1/2. Obviously, it's going to get eaten by the Painbringer. But we can attack with the 3/4. We're totally fine if these 2 cards trade off, and we're totally fine if we deal damage to them. All right, so opponent wisely not blocking there. But we do play another creature, and we are totally happy to trade this one off here. Again, opponent making kind of a weird attack there. I don't think there's any reason to attack with the 1/1, but we're still curious about what's in their hand, so we will make these blocks and see what happens. Because we have the second Spiritual Guardian already, we are totally fine making that block. And even if they had a card that could blow us out or kill our creature, we would still have something left behind. Now, we drew our Take Vengeance, which can destroy a tap creature, but because of really good play, we don't need to use it, and we actually have enough power in play to kill them. So that was a really good example of trading off creatures and using resources wisely. Basically, I think in most games, if you can trade 1 for 1 with creatures, that's usually pretty good. This is one of the issues I have with the tutorial, is that they show you these enchantment auras, the angelic reward, which gives +3/+3 in flying, and the Knight's Pledge +2/+2. I know why they show you these. They're trying to introduce the idea of enchantments to you. Just as a heads up, in general, enchantments like this that enchant your creatures are generally considered to be bad value. I know looking at a card like Angelic Reward gets a lot of people excited, and they say, oh, +3/+3 in flying, that is amazing. But the problem is, if you play this on your creature, you now have 2 cards invested in the same creature, the creature that you played initially, plus this enchantment. And if your opponent has 1 spell that can kill a creature, you are down on resources. They can use 1 card to kill 2 cards, essentially, of yours. And that puts you behind in the resource war. So in general, I think enchantments are generally bad. Obviously, there are some times where it's useful to have, and some enchantments that are really powerful, but I would say neither of these cards is particularly great. You would rather just have another creature. Like, instead of spending 5 mana to make 1 creature a little bit more powerful, I would rather just play another creature for 5 mana. That gives me more resources split between different creatures. But just something to keep in mind. All right, here we go. We've drawn our cat, which is kind of awful. Like, I would rather even just have a Shrine Keeper here. 2 mana 2/2 is much better than 1 mana 1/2. And 2 mana 2/2 isn't even that great of a card. Now, obviously, the point of this tutorial is to introduce flying to you, and the idea that flyers can only be blocked by other flyers. We have nothing else to do. Might as well play our cat. So opponent playing a enchant creature here as well. Again, generally bad. Not great in this situation, because if we have 1 card that can kill the Zephyr Gull, we now take out 2 cards from the opponent's board. Obviously, they're going to be able to attack through here, but we're not worried about a couple points of damage. Hey, look, we drew one as well. So this does make the cat much better, but I would rather just have a Shrine Keeper here, a 2 mana 2/2, split the stats between multiple creatures, because if they kill our cat, they've now taken out 2 of our resources instead of just 1. So I'm totally happy to be trading back damage here with our opponent. Now they played the 1 card that could stop us, 0/4. And this actually shows a situation where Knight's Pledge wasn't great either. They have now played 1 card that blocks 2 cards worth of resources for us. The Sanctuary Cat and the Knight's Pledge are now both blanked by 1 card of the opponent's. If we had just drawn a Shrine Keeper, 2 mana 2/2 in this situation, we would have 2 creatures. We could still attack and still deal damage to the opponent. The opponent would block our 2/2, and this 1/2 cat would get in for points of damage. But because we have a Knight's Pledge instead, our cat is just blanked by the 0/4. Not great. No attacks. Two damage to us. Something like Water Knot perfect example. I'm not sure which creature the computer is going to play this on, but this is a removal spell. And enchantment auras like this are actually decent because it's being played on one of our creatures to take it out of play. This is what's known as a removal spell. It removes our creature from being able to take place in combat. And this is actually a good situation there. It also demonstrates the point. Like, what if we didn't have this line breaker, and if the opponent had played this on the Sanctuary Cat, they would have used one card, Water Knot, to get rid of two of our cards, Sanctuary Cat and the Knight's Pledge. So perfect situation where enchantment auras that buff your creatures aren't necessarily what you want to spend your time on. Bit of a weird play from the opponent there too. There's no reason for them to play Water Knot on Linebreaker. They should have just played it on Sanctuary Cat because Sanctuary Cat is better, has higher stats. So a bit of a weird play from the computer, but we'll take it. And we are now going to invest 3 resources into the same card, which makes our card even worse. I know it looks very powerful in this situation, but again, what if they have another Water Knot? What if this card here is another card that can remove our cat? They would have gotten it 3 for 1, used 1 resource to kill 3. So enchantment's not where you want to be. 2 to us. Hoping to draw a land here to play Spiritual Guardian, gain a little bit of life. Okay, Divination. Nice demonstration of the resource battle that Magic is. I don't know if Divination itself is a great card, but basically they spent 1 card to draw 2, so they are up on resources. Again, I don't think Divination is particularly great, but there are some cards that allow you to draw 3 or 4 cards, and those can sometimes be worth the effort to get more resources. We will play our land. And again, we're not going to play Spiritual Guardian until after we attack, because we don't want our opponent to know that we have it. We want them to make decisions with less information, not more. And now it looks like we finally turned the corner. We gain a bit of life. This Zephyr Gull has put quite a bit of work in, but we are now much more powerful than our opponent. Except that they played a Titanic Pelagisaur. 1 card that blanks 3 cards. Right there, 1 card has just blanked all 3 of these cards, the cat and the 2 enchantments. And the Spiritual Guardian to an extent as well. Now, what the computer gave us is Angelic Reward. Again, you're going to play this in the tutorial and think, wow, these cards are amazing. I would rather just have a 5-mana creature that has flying, rather than put an enchantment on a different creature that has flying. What if I didn't have any creatures in play? What if the opponent had killed all my creatures, and this is the 1 card I draw, and now it's useless? I wouldn't have a creature to put it on, and I have to hold it in hand, and I'm likely to lose that game. So one of the pro tips you're going to get from this video is spread your resources around when you have them. So a lot of new players will look at this and say, oh, I'm going to put this on my biggest creature, the cat, and make it even bigger so it's super, super powerful. That has the same problem as playing enchantments to begin with, where we would invest all of our resource in 1 creature. And if it dies, we've just lost now 4 cards worth of value. The other things to consider on this board is that the cat is blanking the Pelagisaur. So even if they attack with this creature, we can block with Sanctuary Cat. And neither of them is going to kill the other one. They're going to bounce off each other. That's what we call it in Magic. If neither creature dies, we call it bouncing. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to put the Angelic Reward on the Spiritual Guardian. I'm still going to get in for a bit of damage, but they now have to choose which creature to interact with if they draw a card like another one of these water knots that removes one of our creatures from combat. They have to decide which one to do because both of these are quite large. If I had just played the wings on the cat, my Spiritual Guardian is basically doing nothing at that point. So let's go ahead and attack. The opponent now forced to leave Gull back on defense unless they have something good in their hand. Just as we drew it up, the cat and the Pelagosaur are going to bounce. Pretty sure the opponent didn't want to attack with Zephyr Gull there because they're not going to be able to block our Spiritual Guardian. But it's a scripted AI, so because of our superior play, we've outthought the computer. Yeah, and they go ahead and play another ground creature. Because we split our resources up, we don't actually even need this other Knight's Pledge. And we're going to get them a turn earlier, I think, than the tutorial wanted us to. All right, we are humming along, and we get a couple more cards. Again, I understand why they're giving you these. They want to introduce the instant type of card, a card that you can play many times throughout the game on your turn, your opponent's turn, in between different steps, or in response to other effects. Instants are great. These instants are not. This tactical advantage card is pretty bad in general, and I would recommend taking it out of your deck almost immediately as soon as you are able to. There's just too many restrictions on it. You have to play this during combat after your creature gets blocked or when you've blocked someone else's creature. And that basically takes the power of an instant, which you can play whenever, and restricts it so much that there's only one very specific time when you can play it. Also, giving a creature +2/+2, sure, maybe it can help you win one combat, but in general, it's not worth replacing an entire card in your deck with this. This is something we call the combat trick. It's meant to be played to help you win fights in combat. And combat tricks in general are not high priorities for deck building, so I would suggest taking these out. There are actually better cards than this that cost 1 mana and don't have all these restrictions on them. So it's just something to think about. Confront the Assault is pretty sweet. I don't think this card is great. It's the same thing. It takes the advantage of having an instant and then restricts it to where you can only play it if something is attacking you. The effect is quite powerful. 5 mana, create 3 1/1 flyers. That's actually a good effect. But again, there are cards that will do something similar to this without the restriction of having to already be under attack. So 2 cards that are pretty neat, but I would say neither of those is worth our time. Of course, we have to play with them because it's the tutorial, but in general, those kind of combat tricks and those kind of very specific effects aren't going to be super valuable to you. All right, good for us. We drew our Sanctuary Cat, so we have something to do on turn 1. In general, 1 mana cards need to be much more powerful than this in order to be played in a deck. There's a lot of decks that don't play any cards that cost 1 mana. In general, they're just way too weak. Again, I would probably rather have a second Shrine Keeper in this hand. 2 mana 2/2 is going to be much more valuable a lot of the time compared to 1 mana 1/2. This card gets blanked by pretty much everything. So we're going to play our land, and then we're going to attack. And the opponent playing their instant. So this is the perfect situation to demonstrate again why we don't play the Shrine Keeper right away. This Cruel Cut could have killed a Shrine Keeper. So if we play this before combat and then attack, the opponent can decide not to kill the 1/2 and instead kill the 2/2, which is way worse for us. So that's one of the reasons why we wouldn't have played the Shrine Keeper until after attacks. Now, obviously, this tutorial is geared around teaching you about instant speed effects, like this Cruel Cut or flash creatures that you can play like instants. But we're going to just attack into it because can't win by not dealing damage. I wouldn't get discouraged if this happens to you in a regular game. A lot of new players will be like, oh man, they totally got me. They killed my thing. But in the resource war, we're even, right? They spent one card that cost 2 mana to kill one of our cards that cost 2 mana. So we're equal. We didn't gain or lose anything there. It was just an even exchange, and that's fine. Magic is a lot of even exchanges coupled with sometimes gaining an advantage. Now, this is a bit of an interesting situation. Again, it shows how awful enchantments are. I would rather this just be another creature to play because we already know that the opponent has instant speed effects in their deck. If they have another Cruel Cut, that's really bad for us because this being an instant, they can actually play it in response to us casting Knight's Pledge. So what would happen is if we would play Knight's Pledge, in response, they would kill the Shrine Keeper before it gets the buff. And then both of our cards go into the graveyard and they only spent one card. This is a situation where I would generally attack before playing the Knight's Pledge. They still might get us. The other thing to consider is that maybe they have another Nimble Pilferer, and then it is better to play the Knight's Pledge because a 2/1 can kill our 2/2, but the 2/1 couldn't kill the 4/4 we had in play. So I think what the program wants you to do is play the Knight's Pledge here. In general, I would say that's bad. And this might even be a situation where I just don't attack my opponent. They're not going to let me do that, though. They say you have to enchant before attacking. If this was a real game and my opponent had 4 untapped lands and 5 cards in hand, I probably wouldn't play Knight's Pledge. I would just pass the turn and do nothing. I wouldn't even attack. And I would make them make the first move so that I have more information about whether or not this Knight's Pledge is going to be good. The program is making us do this. But it's a situation where, again, I'm not actually going to attack here. What if they play multiple Nimble Pilferers? Or what if they have a more powerful removal spell that can kill the 4/4? I wouldn't attack here. My opponent just has too many resources, but the program is going to make us do it. So we're going to walk into their trap. Again, this actually worked out well, and I think it's because it's the tutorial. But this is one of the situations where the tutorial teaches you bad habits, I think. Opponent spending 2 cards to draw 2 cards and save themselves from taking 4 life. That's probably worth it here, especially if they don't have anything better in hand. We've drawn an instant. So, awful card. Can only be used at very, very specific times. And obviously we're not going to attack here. We only have 5 life. If we do attack, we're going to deal 4 to them, and then they're going to attack us with the Rakshasa and kill us. So no reason to attack. Kind of a risky block as well, but this is a situation where we're forced into blocking. There is no way around it. We have to block and then buff our creature, which ends up working out well for us this turn. I think that is a bit of a trap. That's something, again, they show you in the tutorial, that a lot of new players will be like, oh, tactical advantage was great, it saved my thing. But again, I would rather just have a card that killed their creature or another creature that could blank it. So we'll this is another situation where I wouldn't attack. My opponent has 6 mana and 4 cards in hand, and we only have 5 life. I think it's better for us to be a bit defensive here, but the computer won't let us do it. If I was in this situation in a real game, I definitely wouldn't attack here. Opponent's going to play 2 Nimble Pilferers. They're going to double block us. Luckily, we have the tactical advantage against them, but again, this is teaching bad habits. It makes tactical advantage look really good, but in general, these cards are awful. It's only because it's a scripted interaction that it worked out well, I think. I would rather have just drawn another creature to play there. Opponent, again, trying to bait us into bad attacks. This is a situation where now we do want to attack. If our opponent somehow finds a way to attack us back, we're going to have Confront the Assault to basically save ourselves or buy us some time. So we do want to be a little bit aggressive now because we have something that can specifically prevent us from losing in the situation we're worried about. And I think that is actually what this program shows. What we're worried about is them playing a bunch of flash creatures, attacking us, and us losing once we're tapped out. Luckily, we drew the one spell that can help us. I would much rather have Confront the Assault than Tactical Advantage, but I don't think either card is particularly good. Knight's Pledge also looking really bad here. I would rather just have multiple creatures in play. All right, now this is a situation where we actually do get to use a little bit of strategy. I think what a lot of players would do and what the computer kind of expects you to do is block all 3. Trading a 1/1 for a 2/1, in general, that seems like a really good deal and is probably the correct play a lot of the time. But our opponent is at 6 life, and we have a 4/4 in play that's going to get to attack. The opponent has no more cards in hand. So again, we have perfect information about what they're doing. And we have 5 life. So what we're going to do is we can actually only block one of them. We're going to take 4 damage from the 2 Nimble Pilferers. And we now have 4, 5, 6 power worth of attackers to kill them. If they weren't at exactly 6 life, I would probably block all 3. But because we are going to kill them on their turn and there's nothing they can do to prevent it, no cards in hand, no special lands, no other tricks in play, we're just going to block like this and kill them a turn, probably a turn earlier than the computer expected. Yeah. So we drew the card that would have helped us win the game anyway, but if we hadn't drawn this, we're still in a position to win this turn. They're making me enchant my creature. I'm going to spread the resources around and then smash in with everything. No reason to attack with this creature. Both of these are going to be enough. If you take anything away from this tutorial today, it's enchantments are bad. In general, I wouldn't play them. These are a couple of nice cards, though. I'm going to start talking about Inspiring Commander first. So 6 mana, 1/4, not great. Our 6 mana cards, we would expect them to be much more powerful than that. But the effect here is actually really good. Whenever we play another small creature with power 2 or less, we gain a life, which doesn't really matter, but is sometimes nice. But we get to draw a card. So that goes back to our resource war in Magic, where every time we play a small creature, we get to draw another card. So we're gaining resources at a faster rate than our opponent is. That makes this effect very powerful. In general, I don't think This card is particularly good because it costs a lot of mana to play. And for 6 mana, I would expect to have a much more powerful card. Most games of Magic go 7 or 8 turns and not much past that. So if we get to 6 mana and we play Inspiring Commander, there's really only 1 or 2 turns where we're going to get to use the effect. It is powerful. This card does play out well in this white deck, but it's just not that great. So I would be looking for more powerful cards. Sarah Angel, on the other hand, very good. I think this is going to be one of the better cards in this white deck if you decide to play this deck after you finish the tutorial. 5 mana, 4/4 flying is fine. It's pretty powerful. And then the added benefit of Vigilance is just great on this card. So Sarah Angel, probably one of your better cards. In general, I would rather have 2 Sarah Angels than one of each of these. So maybe that's something you want to think about if you go to modify your deck. Sarah Angel also costs less mana. It only costs 5. So we can play it a turn earlier. It's going to have a big effect on the game. So, a couple nice cards, though. I think both of these do play out well in this deck. But I would rather just have the cheaper card, the Sarah Angel, and have 2 of those. Sarah Angel, also a good comparison to Angelic Reward. So 5 mana, 4/4 flying Vigilance, compared to a 5 mana give something else +3/+3 in flying. I would rather have Sarah Angel every time. Again, we're going to tie up too many resources in a single creature, which makes us vulnerable. And a lot of the time, you would rather just have another body in play to attack and block and be a part of the combats. So Angelic Reward, much, much worse than just playing a second Sarah Angel in your deck. They basically have the same effect on the game if you're winning, and if you're losing, having a second creature in play is going to be much better for you. And that is a way to... Oh, we get to fight Nicol Bolas. That is a way to evaluate cards, is rather than always thinking, how does this card help me win when I'm winning, you want to think about, does a card help me when I'm losing? Does a card help me when I'm winning? Does a card help me when my opponent and I are equal? You want to play as many cards as you can that help you in as many situations as possible. You don't want to just play a card that only helps you win more. If you were going to already win the game and a card just lets you win even more and shame your opponent by your crushing defeat, that's generally not where you want to be. You would rather play a card that saves you when you're losing and helps you win, and etc. So again, Tactical Advantage, not a great card. Okay, Miasmic Mummy, 2 mana, 2/2. Each player discards a card. In general, this is worse than just 2 mana, 2/2. But if someone has this card in their deck, it's likely because their deck is built around discarding things and having some graveyard synergies, having cards in the graveyard that matter or effects that can bring them back. Otherwise, I wouldn't play a card like this. We got to get rid of something. How do we decide what to get rid of? Well, we have a 2 mana card, a 3 mana card, and this awful combat trick. We have 1 land in play and 3 other in our hand. So that means if I discard a plains, I'm still going to be able to play everything in my hand, which is great for me. If instead of another... if instead of one of these cards, I had a card that cost 4 mana that was really, really good, I might consider keeping the lands and getting rid of Tactical Advantage. Like, instead of this Line Breaker, if we had something that cost 4 or 5 mana, even our Sarah Angel, I might get rid of this awful card and keep the lands. But in this situation, I think it's probably right to get rid of a land. And that's what the program tells us to do. I think a lot of new players would always discard the land, and sometimes you don't want to do that. Like in this situation, we drew Spiritual Guardian, and this card is going to be much more impactful in the game than anything else in our hand right now. So if instead of the Line Breaker, if we had Spiritual Guardian in our starting hand, I probably would have kept that other planes and gotten rid of Tactical Advantage. Obviously, the computer doesn't give us the ability to do that, but you want to be very careful about discarding lands because you might just never be able to play your powerful cards if you get rid of too many lands. Cruel Cut there, totally fine. They spent one card and got rid of one card. All right, perfect example. I would much rather have more lands in my hand at this point in time. We've drawn two very powerful spells, Spiritual Guardian and Inspiring Commander, that we might not get to play this game because we discarded a land. I would much rather have gotten rid of Tactical Advantage. Now, I think the tutorial does help us out and gives us a couple lands, which is nice, but there's no guarantee of that. There are many, many games where you get stuck at 3 lands, you can't play your powerful cards, and you just lose due to what's called mana screw. I think the game does kind of rig it so that we're okay. I'm not attacking here. We are very... Actually, no, this is actually an interesting decision. So I think because we have the tactical advantage, the program wants us to attack. And in this situation, it's probably worth it. And here's the reason why. Our opponent is playing things like Ambitions Cost, one card that drew them 3 cards. They have a whole bunch of cards in play. They've got multiple colors. It's very obvious that the opponent is trying to build up to something very large. And our deck doesn't really do that. Our deck plays a bunch of little 2/2 creatures and 3/2s and tries to, I don't know, get Inspiring Commander out. So this is a situation where our opponent is trying to do really, really big plays, and we have a bunch of little plays, and it's probably to our benefit to put pressure on them. So we are going to attack here and use our tactical advantage, and I want to try and clear the way so that I can get as many attacks in as possible before my opponent plays all of their big spells. We are going to try and beat them down, deal as much damage as we can before they overpower us. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do that. Rise from the Grave. Yeah, so opponent does have graveyard synergies, like we said. That Miasmic Mummy was good for them because they got to play this powerful Volcanic Dragon a turn earlier. Rather than having to play 6 mana for this, they were able to use Rise from the Grave. We're going to attack them. Opponent doesn't have any mana untapped, so they're in this situation, it doesn't actually matter that we attack them before playing our card, but again, it's just a good habit to get into. So opponent is going to copy their next instant or sorcery. In general, I think these kind of cards are also bad. You would probably much rather just have another card that matters. What if you only had this left in your hand and you didn't have something to copy? That would be really bad for you. It obviously works out here. They get to copy Seismic Rupture and kill all of our creatures, but in general, I think the kind of twin cast, double cast thing is not particularly good. For the same reason as enchantments are bad, you would just rather have another card that matters in your deck that doesn't rely on having creatures in play, or in this case, having instants in your hand. All right, Inspiring Commander, inspire us. This actually shows why Inspiring Commander is kind of bad. We spent 6 mana. This is the biggest play in our deck, and it did nothing. The turn that it comes into play, it sits there as a 1/4. Can't block this flyer, doesn't attack them very well. Basically does nothing in our deck until we draw a Shrinekeeper, which the computer let us do, but I think that really shows why Inspiring Commander is bad. I just don't want to spend 6 mana and do nothing. Like, nothing happened the turn we played it. Obviously, now we get to chain a couple of these together. And this is a situation where I would play my creatures before combat because I want more information. The opponent is also tapped out, and I want to see what cards I draw before I decide whether or not to attack here. We are going to play the Take Vengeance, destroy their 4/4 flyer, and attack for 1. One of the good things about Inspired Commander with this tutorial is it teaches you that drawing cards is really good. And in general, you do want to draw cards. Ooh, and we get wrecked by the Chaos Maw. See, this is a creature, this is a bit expensive, 7 mana for 6/6, but it has a really nice effect when it comes into play. So the turn that you play this card, it has an immediate effect on the game. I mean, they killed 2 of our creatures with it. That has a much more profound impact than something like Inspiring Commander, which requires you to then wait a turn to get the benefit from it. Obviously, we're not attacking here. And we are going to get a big turn with Confront the Assault, where we're going to play 3 1/1s, draw 3 cards off of Inspiring Commander, and maybe get to block a little bit as well. So in this case, Confront the Assault was really good, and I think this card is probably worth keeping in the deck. It's a big ask to make you leave up 5 mana, because I mean you have to play this card on your opponent's turn, which means that you have to not have played a card on your turn, and leaving 5 mana up is a lot. It's also going to signal to your opponent that maybe you do have something like this in your hand, because they're going to be looking at you with your 5 mana in play and be like, why didn't you play something? What do we got here? We got a cat, which does nothing. We have a tactical advantage, which doesn't help us kill the dragon 1/1. If we don't block some of these creatures, we are going to lose. So I think this is a situation where we block with 2 creatures and use our tactical advantage. There is some value to sometimes blocking with a 3rd. Obviously, in this situation, it wouldn't matter because one of our creatures is going to be a 3/3, and then a 1/1, and then another 1/1. So it's a bit of overkill. But sometimes you want to play around your opponent having a card that gets rid of one of your creatures. In this situation, we're not going to do that because they would just kill whichever one we use tactical advantage on. But if, let's say this was a 1/1, a 1/1, and a 2/2, we might just block with everything, see what the opponent does, and then if they go to play a trick or a spell, we can respond with tactical advantage. But I think this is what we have to do. We're not blocking the 6/6. We still have enough life that it doesn't matter. We can always block this the next turn. So I don't want to throw my resources away prematurely. I know that at some point in time, I'm probably going to have to block the spirit on the Chaos Maw. But it doesn't matter if I do it this turn or if I do it in a future turn. Either way, I'm still trading a spirit for 6 to prevent 6 damage, essentially. I could do it last turn, I could do it this turn. But in general, you want to keep your resources in play as long as you can. Let's go ahead and play the cat, see what we draw off Inspiring Commander. Ooh, Sarah Angel, nice. So let's go ahead and attack. We want to be very careful about attacking here because this card can kill us very quickly when the opponent plays other spells to help it. But we're also probably going to lose this game anyway. So we want to try and be as aggressive as possible to try and get their life total down. And that's where keeping this other spirit back really helps, because now we can make the decision to deal extra damage to them. We're going to have 2 blockers in play. And this turn, we're probably going to block with Sanctuary Cat. We don't want our life total to get too low. Ancient Crab, which doesn't really matter. 5-3. Okay, so here the opponent has tapped out. They've played all of their cards before combat, and that actually helps us make better decisions. Case in point, why the opponent probably should have waited to play Crab and Demon until after attacks, because now we don't have to be scared of their hand. They have no possible way to play other spells, so we can make this block here. We're likely going to lose the Angel. I mean, the opponent should deal damage to the Angel first. How it works with multiple blocking is I decide to block with 2 creatures, but then the opponent gets to decide which one to deal damage to first. And in general, you want to deal damage to the thing you want to kill more. In this situation, they actually assign damage to the cat first, which means that when we play Tactical Advantage, they are going to kill the cat still, but not have enough leftover damage to kill the Angel. If they had blocked the other way, or signed blockers the other way, they would have killed the Angel and not the cat, and we would be in a much worse position. All right, what are we going to do here? Well, we drew an Angelic Reward. Again, would have been much better if this was just another 4/4 Angel. We're definitely attacking with Serra Angel this turn. It has Vigilance. There's no way for them to block it because it has Flying. So Serra Angel can both attack and block in the same round, which is really nice. The question here is, what do we play Angelic Reward on? In general, I think it's better to spread your resources out. We're not really worried about Ancient Crab because it gets blanked by Serra Angel. They're likely going to be able to attack us with this Demon this turn, but we do have a little bit of life. So I feel like we do just spread our resources out. We're going to equip the Spirit rather than the Angel. Again, I think a lot of new players would throw Angelic Reward on Angel, make a giant 7/7, Vigilance, Flying, which does sound good, and like sometimes that will win you the game. But if our opponent plays a spell that kills one of our creatures, I would rather have 2 4/4 flyers rather than just 1 dead and a 1/1 left over. We'll attack with both. And now we have 2 flying creatures, both of them that can kill our opponent. Block the 1/5. And if our opponent can't kill both of our flyers, we win the game. Excellent. Okay, so we've completed the tutorial. And we've unlocked a bunch of decks. I think if you are wanting to play one of these decks, the best ones to start with are either the white deck, because you'll be a little bit more familiar with it, something that you just learned how to use in the tutorial. I think the most powerful deck is probably the green one. I think this deck does everything that new players want to do. It plays lands, it plays really, really big creatures and attacks. So it's very easy to learn the strategy of this deck, and I think it is one of the more powerful ones. The Goblin deck can be kind of fun. It basically plays a bunch of little tiny dorky goblins and swings in with them. Can be fun. I think it's a little bit underpowered, but it's definitely something worth playing. I don't think this black deck is particularly good. I've played with it a few times, and it just seems to be lacking ways to win. It doesn't seem to have a very cohesive strategy. I don't think Aerial Domination is very good either. It just plays too many underpowered creatures, like those Vexing Gulls, 1 mana, 1/1 flying. It's just a card that you probably don't want to put in your deck. Really, though, I think the best way to get started is to pick one that seems interesting and go with it and learn the game first. But if you want to probably win a little bit more, the green deck and the white deck seem to be the best of the five. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. My name's Travis, and this has been the Daily Travesty.